Hello, all, and welcome back to the Potted Plant YouTube channel. And today, I wanted to discuss tariffs, more specifically, Trump's tariffs, and whether they are a good or a bad thing from the average consumer's perspective. So, first of all, what is a tariff? A tariff is essentially an import tax placed on the imported good. So, what that means is if America imports Mexican goods, for example, whether it be tortilla chips or tequila, that good will then be taxed by America. And I today wanted to discuss the implication of specifically Trump's tariffs on China and the effects that will have on the US economy and the US consumer. First, let's begin with why Trump introduced these tariffs. In economics, there is a concept called protectionism. What protectionism means is essentially protecting the interests of your national identity as a country rather than international interests as a global population. That is why you might have heard Trump say, bring jobs back to America, or bringing jobs back to America, because that's what essentially protectionism is. So, will tariffs actually bring jobs back to America? And what are the short-term implications for America's purchasing power from the general consumer perspective? And what will be the impact on, say, a consumer doing their average weekly shop, for example? But before that, let's begin with the wider implication from an American and Chinese perspective. So, one day, if you can imagine, Donald Trump wakes up and he tweets, "I hate China. They are a threat to national security, and I want to stop our reliance on their manufacturing and products." Now, just as a disclaimer, that's not how it actually happened. I just like to think that's how it actually happened, because it would be quite funny if it did. And knowing the volatility of that man's brain, that probably is pretty close to how it actually happened. So, America introduce these hard tariffs on China's goods importing into the United States. And long story short, nothing happens. Everybody goes, "Yay, Trump, here's your Nobel Peace Prize." No, only joking. What actually happens is China then begin to retaliate with tariffs of their own. So at this point you're thinking, okay, this is bad, but maybe still a bit manageable. Except, no, it's not. Because America actually relies far more on imported goods from China. In fact, they have a trade deficit of over 202 billion as of 2025, according to the Bureau Census for Statistics, meaning that America rely far more on China than China do America. What this means is essentially China could realistically stop the exports to China to America, and then America essentially would have to look for replacements for these things. Now, it's all well and good to assume that, okay, China have stopped now, we can do this in America. But you see, you can, but you can't at the same time. And this is where another economic theory comes in called comparative advantage. Now, what that means is China have basically had years to build up massive scale industrial exporting expertise. And America still have that exporting capability, but not as much as China do. So essentially they would have to rapidly build the infrastructure, pay higher wages to get these things made in America, because no business is going to go, right, they've introduced tariffs, let's build our factories in America instead. Because America simply might not have the factory space. They might not have as cheap labour, so the cost for those companies will actually increase, which will make them not want to produce their product in America in the first place. Now, I'd be stupid not to admit that in the long-term implication of these tariffs, getting homegrown production is better than outsourcing. But for the short-term implications, heavy tariffs like the ones Donald Trump has introduced, 30, 60, 90%, are simply disastrous and completely ill-founded. Because let's say these companies choose to still stay in China because the factory lease or whatever, because the labour costs are still cheap. What are they gonna do to downplay that 90% tariff that has just been tagged on to all their products? They're going to pass it on to the general American consumer. And now, here's where the law of supply and demand comes into play. Basically, you know that chocolate that you really like, for example. What if a 90% tariff was placed on that and it became harder to produce? Therefore, they stopped producing it. That would mean the demand for that particular product is higher than the supply. And when that typically happens, the prices of that limited supply increase. And even if they do continue to produce it at the same rate that they currently do, the price will still increase anyway, because there's no way that these big businessmen will incur the extra costs themselves. What they will do is they will pass it forward to the consumer, so gradually prices will go up and up until suddenly that chocolate bar you loved, which was initially $1 to $2, becomes $5. And I bet you're thinking, but okay, what? This will surely happen to China too, right? And yes, but not as much, because China still has vast amounts of infrastructure to produce the product themselves in their own countries. China has the capabilities to stop all imports from America much easier than America can stop all the imports from China. And that is the whole point of the video. And that will eventually lead to the standard US consumer purchasing power dropping significantly. Thanks for watching. Bye all.